Welcome back. Let's get right to it. No need to waste time. In this video, we will learn about Klaus Schwab. Schwab released a book entitled COVID-19, The Great Reset, 7 months into the pandemic. That's 7 months. This is either a half-cocked plan that is supposed to be a manual to building the world back better, or it was in the works well before the pandemic. Either reason is enough to be alarmed.
There's a damn flag.
Information regarding the Schwabs before around 1970 has been largely buried and scrubbed from public knowledge. But foreign archives and less mainstream sources can provide insight. Before we can look to the future, let's look to the past to see the cloth from which Klaus was cut. Klaus Martin Schwab was born in 1938 in Ravensburg, Germany, son of Eugene Schwab, who was managing director of the German branch for Swiss company Escher Wyss during World War II. We see here in Klaus's book, Stakeholder Capitalism, it's dedicated to his parents, Eugene Wilhelm Schwab being his father. This is an immigration record from Brazil showing Eugene's parents listed, father being Gottfried. This is a record of administrative and disciplinary law regarding Swiss citizenship, specifically the citizenship of a child whose mother is Swiss and whose father is a foreigner. Eugene Schwab is listed as the complainant. The complainant's father is listed as Gottfried, and the complainant's child is listed as Klaus Martin. We can see here from a German database website, Klaus Martin Schwab was born on 30 March 1938 in Ravensburg, Upper Swabia, where his father was commercial director of a daughter, I think they mean sister branch, or it translates like sister branch, commercial director of a daughter of the Zurich mechanical engineering company Escher Wyss. And also we see it states both parents were born in Switzerland. One thing you'll notice is they never really speak about his parents directly. They always make certain to mention that his parents are Swiss, and that kind of ties into that whole citizenship issue that we read about. We'll get into that down the line sometime, probably in a different video. Here we see a German brochure. It says 150 years, Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Lake Constance, Upper Swabia. We see here Eugene Schwab listed, connecting him once again to Escher Wyss. So we see here his father, Eugene Schwab, connected to Klaus Martin Schwab, and we see his father's connection to Escher Wyss. This is the History Dictionary of Switzerland. Regarding Ravensburg, it states, in 1856 through 59, the factory was established by Walter Zuppinger. In the 1930s, it was the largest employer in the region and became a National Socialist model company. This was awarded by the Nazi regime to companies that they thought best embodied National Socialist ideals. In 1939, shortly after the war broke out, Colonel Jacob Schmidany, who was the president of the board of directors at Escher Wyss, stated, however, the outbreak of war does not necessarily mean unemployment for the machinery industry of a neutral country. On the contrary, this is an early indication of Escher Wyss's willingness and, dare I say, eagerness to profit from war. Ravensburg also showed early signs of anti-Semitism, evidenced as far back as the Ravensburg massacre of 1430. Here we have a report that can be found through PubMed. As we can see, it states racial improvement in Ravensburg. After implementation of the law for the prevention of progeny with hereditary diseases on the 1st of January 1934, the first enforced sterilizations were undertaken at in Ravensburg. Between April 1934 and March 1938, 389 sterilization operations were performed. The main reasons included mental illness, 57%, schizophrenia, 23%, and epilepsy, 6%. So we see the first sterilizations, forced sterilizations, eugenics. Here's a German article. The headline says, Wreath for the Victims of National Socialism laid at the Memorial of the Grey Buses. He goes on to say, since 1996, January 27th has been the nationwide day of remembrance of the victims of National Socialism. It refers to January 27th, 1945, when the Auschwitz concentration camp was liberated. These are results of an investigation conducted by a Swiss news agency regarding firms with Swiss capital and forced labor in Germany, the most important enterprises. This investigation was performed for the purposes of determining settlements for victims of National Socialism. We can see Escher Weiss, Ravensburg, 198 to 203 forced laborers. We can also see the sentiments that were prevalent in Ravensburg. Here we have the website for a Norwegian hydro plant that was converted to a museum. Regarding its history, it states on February 27th, 1943, Norwegian resistance fighters blew up the heavy water plant at the Norsk Hydro Works near that city. This act of sabotage hit the only industrial plant under German control that was capable of producing heavy water in significant quantities. The team of German atomic physicists around Otto Hahn needed this water in order to drive an experimental reactor for making plutonium for military use. And it goes on to say that at the heart of the power station was an engine house, initially equipped with 10 14,500 horsepower turbines built by the German engineering company Voith in Heidenheim and the Zurich firm Escher Weiss. Further proof of Escher Weiss's Nazi collaborations can be found in the OSS records. Found in the National Archives, within Record Group 226, we see intelligence obtained by Allied forces during World War II. The first and third show knowledge of business interactions between Escher Weiss and Germany. The middle shows record of Escher Weiss supplying flamethrowers to Germany. Eugene Schwab is the managing director during these times. And in 1938, Klaus is born. Klaus goes on to graduate from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich with an engineering diploma. From 1963 until 1966, Klaus worked as assistant to the Director General of the German Machine Building. In 1967, Klaus Schwab gained a doctorate in economics from the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, as well as a Master of Public Administration from JFK School of Government at Harvard. At Harvard, he was taught by Henry Kissinger, who became one of the most influential figures in his life. In this picture, we see Kissinger, Klaus, and Ted Heath, former UK Prime Minister, at the 1980 World Economic Forum. Also in 1967, Klaus would follow in his father's footsteps and go to work for Escher Weiss in top management. On the World Economic Forum's website, they have a synopsis of each year's meeting. And the one for the very first meeting, we can see where it says in 1970, Schwab left the Swiss industrial group Escher Weiss, where he had served in top management. It also mentions that he married Hilda. It's very interesting that Hilda Stoll was his first collaborator at the World Economic Forum, him marrying her shortly thereafter. It's almost like a corporate marriage, and we'll get back to that in a bit. While at Escher Weiss, he spearheaded the merger of Sulzer and Escher Weiss, who would become Sulzer Escher Weiss and eventually Sulzer AG. Sulzer Escher Weiss also worked closely with Braun Baveri, a company that assisted Germany during World War II with some of their U-boat technology. It was revealed in a collaborative review initiated by Swiss authorities and a man named Peter Hug that Escher Weiss was assisting the South African apartheid regime. This occurred throughout the 1960s, including while Klaus was on board. As with most sensational discoveries, there was a book written about this report. The title of that book is Switzerland and South Africa, 1948 through 1994. And within the book it says, as the study by Hug explicates, the anti-apartment movement of Switzerland pointed to German reports according to which Sulzer Escher Weiss and BBC, which is Braun Baveri, has supplied parts for the South African uranium enrichment plant. Down the line, once we look into the Great Reset, we will see nuclear energy as a focal point. After leaving Escher Weiss in 1970, Klaus went on to establish the European Management Symposium, which would become the World Economic Forum. In the third such meeting, we can see two developments distinguish this Davos meeting. First, Aurelio Pecchiai, the Italian industrialist, delivered a speech summarizing the limits to growth, a book that had been commissioned by the Club of Rome, the global think tank that he founded. When it was published in 1972, the study had caused a sensation for calling into question the sustainability of global economic growth. The authors outlined the choices that society had to make to reconcile economic development and environmental constraints. The book garnered attention because of its controversial computer model generated conclusions, one of which was that overpopulation was an issue and that population needed to be reduced. We can see this book had an impact and will ultimately help the World Economic Forum shape its ethos. I'll have a link to the book in the description. But to summarize the conclusion, in most cases, even for very optimistic assumptions and resource availability and technological progress, collapse cannot be avoided, but at best only delayed. Only a carefully chosen set of world policies designed to stop population growth and stabilize material consumption could avoid collapse and lead the world's economy to a steady state while maintaining an average level of material consumption not different than it was in the 1970s. Moving along, we have an article here from 2014, Contraception Key in Climate Change Fight, Gore Gates. And right out the gate, we see stopping overpopulation is one way the dangers of climate change can be mitigated, according to two of the most prominent believers in global warming. Former President Al Gore and Microsoft founder Bill Gates said at the World Economic Forum in Davos that contraception is a key in controlling the proliferation of unusual weather they say is endangering the world. So we can see so many years later that they still uphold some of these ideals and notions that were written about by the Club of Rome and Limit to Growth.
You've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Another book titled The First Global Revolution was also written by the Club of Rome, the other purported think tank that was an inspiration to the World Economic Forum and are now members as well. In it states the common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which demands the solidarity of all peoples. But in designating them as the enemy, we fall into the trap about which we have already warned, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. So humanity is the impediment. Interesting. Lastly, regarding Klaus's wife Hilda, whose maiden name Stoll you rarely come across, her family owns a robotics and automation company named Festo. This is her father Gottlieb Stoll, one of the founders of Festo. We can see on this German website, it says the Festool story, Swabian tinkering conquers the world. In 1925, Albert Feser and Gottlieb Stoll founded a company for the purpose of repairing woodworking machines. Just a few years later, their own tools were developed, and in 1930, the first mobile handheld circular saw, which was soon marketed under the brand name Festo. The FE being for the FE in Feser and the STO being the STO in Stoll. On Festo's current website, we can see how far along they've come. They're prime movers in the field of automation and technical education. As an internationally active family-owned company, we know how important it is to maintain one's roots. Founded in 1925 in Esslingen, Germany, we can see a number of the Stoll family still holding positions on the supervisory board. Here we have an article talking about Festo's fantastical robots inspired by animals and insects. Within that article, they're asked, none of these robots are for sale. Why does Festo make them? Part of their response is that Festo makes its money from pneumatics and industrial automation, but the robo animals are an interesting way to test out innovative designs that may end up in a more ordinary industrial robot. So none of these, conceptual animals and things are really making them money. It's probably costing them money to make them if they're not selling them. And we can see they've gone on to design a pneumatic robot hand with artificial intelligence. I'll have links to the articles and the brochures so that you can read all this for yourself, because they do kind of go into like some of the physics that they're trying out within these different robots. And here we are, back to the present. Now we know a bit more about the harbinger of the Great Reset and what's molded him to be the man he is today. Now we will begin to listen to him speak about the Great Reset in the World Economic Forum. I caution you not to fall for political speak, promising to deliver what we normies crave most, but secretly prioritizing elitist agendas. This man has been meeting with the most influential and economically capable people for 40 years, and as we've seen, ideas of globalization and population control are nothing new to the World Economic Forum and its allies, yet we are to believe that COVID-19 was the catalyst for this opportunity to reimagine and reset. The elitists pushing the Great Reset speak of living better with less, but will they themselves be living with less? If the pandemic is any indication, certainly not. We need to use logic and reasoning along with the information at hand in order to discern their true intentions. Let's watch a clip from July 2020 in which Klaus Schwab is discussing his book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. Notice the thumbs start twiddling and pay attention to where he fidgets with his thumbs.
I don't know how it will play out in November, but what we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed, and particularly also people in the gray economy, which are not counted for, who lose their jobs. So we will see definitively a lot of anger already now, but probably increased by the end of the year, because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So we have to prepare for a more angry world. And how to prepare? It means to take the necessary action to create a fairer world, to see that we provide everybody with decent access to the health system, that we make sure that those people who are really left behind, and I'm not speaking only on national levels, I'm speaking also internationally. If I see now the tragedy in some of the emerging countries like South Africa, like some countries in East Asia, I think it's all, I don't have too many remedies. The remedies have to be discussed through dialogue by the stakeholders of our global system, but I just see the need for such a dialogue, and I see the need for action. I see the need for a great reset.
Okay, so the thumbs get to moving while talking about an angrier world. Could be nerves, could be nothing. We'll see. Remember, he is speaking to these global stakeholders. He just stated that they are the ones having the dialogue that will affect us all. None of these people have been elected, a discussion for another time, but these global stakeholders have structured and manipulated the system so that they are able to operate as they see fit. We continue.
To what extent would a reset be brought about by a change in the White House, the election of Joe Biden, for instance?
I don't know. We shouldn't speculate about the outcome of the election. We will see beginning of November, and then we can, in any case, we can, and the World Economic Forum is very open and as an open platform to integrate everybody who is willing to address those issues in a spirit which means to exercise here true global citizenship.
She asks, to what extent would a great reset be brought about by a change in the White House, the election of Joe Biden, for instance? She's not asking if a change, she's asking to what extent would the change affect the onset of the Great Reset. Also, if it were a hypothetical question and understood as a hypothetical, would Klaus feel the need to comment about speculation? Probably not. It is more likely he is framing it as speculation after the slip up. Notice the lip quiver. If you asked me, if Biden became president, to what extent would that affect the onset of the Great Reset? And I answer, well, we shouldn't speculate. That's a non-answer. That's a failure to understand the question. A change would have no effect. A reset is needed regardless of who is in the White House, or something along the lines of it would have a tremendous effect because of X, Y, or Z. Those would be answers. And then he says the World Economic Forum is an open platform with the caveat only if you are willing to address issues in the spirit of global citizenship. Membership in the forum is an application process. There's no benchmark or standard to reach that allows you in. And we continue.
I want to just pick up on some of the economic projections. In your book, you tackle what the future may look like. And at this stage, we're grappling with various letters of the alphabet, whether it's a V or a U or perhaps even a symbol, a tick shape. Can you just give us some clues about the growth down the track, what we can expect?
First, if we look at it at the national or global level, at the macroeconomic level, one of the things we address very much in the book and we are concerned is the increased debt level. We spend about 10 trillion worldwide to deal with the short-term negative effects of the pandemics. But we should be aware we are just increasing our debt situation. And we were already very much debt loaded before we went into the crisis. So how to get at the end out of this debt situation is still a big question mark. Second, we know that there's quite some impact on different industries. We know that certainly the health industry, the digital industry will go out of this crisis strengthened. But we know that many industries which rely particularly on physical interaction will have difficulties to survive. Finally, I just would add, I think this is an opportunity again to find solutions which are beneficial for the next generation. So why not to tie government aid to the green economy which we have to create? Why not to make sure that we revolutionize, digitalize particularly our educational system? So we are here, when we talk about the Great Reset, to talk also about innovation. How can we do things differently from what we used to do? And if we speak about differently, it means also how can we do it to make sure that a majority of people are benefiting from it and not just a minority.
More political speak, 40 years and never a campaign for the majority. All sounds good. Not very many solutions as of now, he says, but they know certainly. What he is certain of is health and digital industries will come out of the pandemic strengthened, and industries that rely on physical interactions will have difficulties. On Sulzer's site, we can see in 1968 they made the switch from machine building, which was the turbines and things, to medical technology. This was during Klaus's time spearheading the merger. We'll conclude.
We started out Davos this year talking about the environment, Greta Thunberg versus Donald Trump. Certainly a lot of headlines crossing from the mountain. But last time round in the crisis, we saw people didn't care so much about the environment when we were talking about large-scale job losses. This time seems different. Are you surprised about how strong the sustainability theme has been right through the pandemic?
No, I would see even a chance to accelerate, let's say, our transition into a green economy, because people probably recognize that we have to become more resilient. We have now the experience of one crisis. The environmental crisis, the climate crisis could be a much bigger one. So I see more awareness, but on the other hand, we have the big issue of unemployment, of low levels of employment. And I think we shouldn't see the two as contradictory objectives.
And there you have it. What are your thoughts on the Great Reset? Before I let you go, let's do a fact check. What it's fact checking is whether or not Klaus's father was Hitler's confidant. If you've watched my previous video, you're hip to the quotation mark tactic. They found the most outrageous claim and decide to fact check that. Just because you assisted the Nazi regime doesn't mean you are chummy with Hitler. That doesn't excuse the assistance, but obviously we know the answer here will be false. We will take a closer look at the article in part 3 of Do Business While Good, where I will have the conspiracy theory talk. That phrase is used as an electric prod whenever one starts to ask questions or reject the narratives that are spoon-fed to ensure compliance. Or maybe I'm a nut job and I need to be institutionalized. Who knows? That's part of the fun of discovery. Stay tuned to find out. And until then, peace.